Okay, so this is the fifth video lecture on the topic of consciousness and its varieties. And as the title of the chapter promises, we're going to be talking about a couple other types of consciousness. Here we're talking about meditation and hypnosis, and both of these are about shifting our awareness so that we experience maybe some changes in our perception of time, changes in our perception of the way our body feels. Maybe we have some alternative sort of emotional responses. Hypnosis is typically thought of as this shift in consciousness that happens with an interaction. So typically you'll have somebody who guides you through hypnosis. Focus on the something, the sound, the thing, so that I, as the guider that's trying to get you to this alternative state, can get you to think about other things. Meditation is this sort of shifting of our awareness that you get to yourself, right? So a common one you might see is people have their fingers like this and they're sitting in this very position and they're focusing on their breath. And so the idea is that this is kind of like the basic concept in yoga, right? That if I am drawing my attention to my breath and my posture and these sorts of things, what I'm not thinking about is I'm not thinking about my bills, I'm not thinking about my homework, I'm not thinking about that interaction with somebody at work. Instead, I'm focusing on these things so I'm shifting my awareness. I'm counting my breaths in. And I remember in my yoga class, I remember one time we were supposed to inhale to the count of 10, exhale to the count of 10, and do this 10 times. So as I am thinking, I'm counting and breathing, I'm not thinking about, that's a lot to think about. Right? Thinking about inhaling, I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, that was number 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's number 2. There's a lot of mental, cognitive energy going into the shifting my consciousness. Okay, so the last alternate consciousness we're going to talk about are those caused by psychoactive drugs. So for our purposes, we're going to talk about 4 kinds of psychoactive drugs. You notice there's 6 pictures over here, but this is the way our textbook is going to outline them. It was a really popular class when I was an undergraduate at K-State that was called Drugs and Human Behavior, and I still have that old textbook. And in that old textbook, there are marijuana is in its own chapter. It's considered its own kind of drug, and then we put designer drugs in their own sort of section because they may actually be both stimulants. They may be a combination of 2 substances that act as a stimulant and as a psychedelic. So let me tell you what that means. Stimulants are drugs that increase brain activity. We'll start with stimulants. Coffee, caffeine, right? Methamphetamine, increase brain activity. Depressants are things that slow down brain activity. The most common kind of depressant is alcohol. Now you may think, oh my gosh, when I get drunk, I dance on tables. That's clearly a stimulant. Well, no, what it actually is doing is slowing down your frontal lobe. It's inhibiting certain parts of your brain. I'll talk about that when we get to that particular topic. But alcohol has, all depressants have the ability to slow your brain down to the point of death. Okay, so you have depressants that slow your brain down. We have stimulants that speed your brain up. We have opiates that act to block the perception of pain. That doesn't change the thing that's causing you pain. It's just so you can't feel it anymore. And you have psychedelics that alter the way, maybe the things you see, maybe your sense of time, these kinds of things. And for our purposes, we're putting marijuana in that category, though it probably belongs in its own chapter. What do psychedelics do? What do they do to your body? Well, one of the things that they can do is they can change the way your synapses function. So back in chapter 2, we were talking about how you have synapses for different neurochemicals like serotonin or dopamine. So when we flood the synapses with a neurotoxin or with a neurotransmitter, the brain actually will changes shape, and some of those synapses will go away. There may form new ones. And so ultimately, psychoactive drugs can literally change the way your body functions, your body and your mind, right? When we use substances enough, our body can kind of create get to a different point of homeostasis, and this is what we would call tolerance. So a really good example is, matter of fact, I was just having a conversation just a little bit ago. If you have a cup of coffee every single day, or I don't know, maybe the first time you have coffee, you have 2 or 3 cups, and like, oh, you get a little buzz, right? You get a little buzz. But after a while, you need more coffee to get that same sort of buzz. And that's because your body has regulated itself so that you no longer have that sensation. And this is what we mean by tolerance, is that you need more of the substance to have the same effect that you had before. This is how basically addictions happen. Then after you've developed your brain has changed, now you have to have 2 or 3 cups just for to feel anything, and then suddenly you stop. Well, some people have what's called withdrawal headaches, right? Or caffeine withdrawal. And this is what we call withdrawal symptom. And it's usually a rebound effect is when you actually have the thing that you were trying to prevent. So here's an example. I used to get these headaches on a pretty regular basis in the same time of the day. And I would take what I call an Excedrin. And Excedrin is aspirin, I think it's aspirin, maybe acetaminophen, and caffeine. Well, I would say to my doctor, I have these same headaches every single day. And what was happening is that my body had become conditioned to have this jolt of caffeine at the same time every day, that when I didn't have it, I would have a headache, which is exactly why I started taking it in the first place. And what my doctor suggested I do is that I stop taking the Excedrin, and sure enough, after 2 weeks, my headaches went away. But I had developed a tolerance and a physical dependency because my body had changed, my brain had changed, and I had to have that caffeine every day or I didn't have the headache. Right? And this is basically what addiction is. Well, I mean, we can talk more about the definition. There's like philosophically, there's different sort of definitions about what exactly addiction is. But physical dependence, your body needs it, changes. Tolerance is now I need more of it to have the same effect. Withdrawal, when it goes away, I experience some sort of suffering. And a rebound effect is the same as when I have the thing that I was trying to prevent from happening if I don't have the drug. Now, the way drugs work in the brain is like the mechanics of what they do is they can increase or decrease the availability of some sort of neurotransmitter like serotonin or dopamine and norepinephrine, right? So an example, I think I mentioned this probably back in chapter 2, is like what Prozac does. So Prozac sits in the receptor site, sits in the reuptake, and it causes more serotonin to stay in the synapse. So it increases the availability of serotonin. It can also block the effect of serotonin. This is what Chantix does. So Chantix is an anti-smoke. It is a stop smoking drug. And Chantix will sit in the receptor of nicotine. So you can smoke your cigarettes all you want, but you're never going to get the buzz from the nicotine because the Chantix is sitting in that receptor site. So it blocks it. Right. Some other things that might be, I'm trying to think of some examples of where you might want to block a neurotransmitter. I can't think off the top of my head. Most of the time, especially when you think about anxiety medicines and depression medicines, most of those want to increase the availability of it. Another thing that drugs might do is they might mimic it. So they might actually act on that receptor site. So it doesn't increase serotonin, it just acts like serotonin and fools your brain into thinking about it. Sometimes in classes, when I have a face-to-face class, we'll talk about what it means to abuse a drug versus abuse. I think that might be a discussion question in this class, actually. And so we consider, for instance, like, if we think of things like caffeine and nicotine and LSD and marijuana and all maybe Tylenol, for instance, if we think of all of these things as something that changes the way our body functions, we need more of it to have the same effect. We feel bad when it's withdrawn. What's the difference between a user and an abuser? If I have developed a dependence on caffeine, am I a coffee drinker or am I a coffee abuser? If alcohol is another one to think about, what's the difference between somebody who's just a social drinker and somebody who's a drunk? If I can drink a lot and still you don't know I've drank a lot, does that make me a drunk? If you can only drink one and you get a buzz and you only do this once a week, but you are obviously drunk, Are you a drunk, or is the person that drinks a lot? Right? So these are sort of some philosophical questions. Like how do we define um, the way, or put a label to the kind of use that people the way that people use psychoactive drugs. Okay, I'm going to stop there, and when I come back, I'm going to talk about alcohol specifically.